Chosen one, this is your year. This year is not ordinary. This is the year of ascension. Every challenge has made you stronger. Every loss has made you more determined. It is no longer time to wait. It is time to act. You are not an ordinary person. You are here to make the impossible possible. This year, you will see that all delays prepare you. Every obstacle makes you stronger. This year is your breaking point. Come on, get up and take action, because nothing can stop you. Write 77 to your Mlara immediately, and don't forget to show yourself. You are the chosen one, and this is your time. Positioned on the brink of certainty and mystery, the team prided themselves on their mastery of the unseen, fortified by years of discipline and cutting-edge tools. Yet the moment arrived when no blueprint or calculation could guide them, a phenomenon unlike any they had prepared for. What they faced wasn't a creature, force, or element. It was intent, the kind that moved beyond human grasp, where purpose was not measured by action, but by an unfathomable presence. Every piece of their sophisticated arsenal, from the finely tuned instruments to their practiced instincts, faltered under the weight of this encounter. It was not an adversary entering their domain, but a declaration of being, standing as if to proclaim that their vigilance was irrelevant. What they observed was not intrusion, but invitation, leaving them not as trackers, but as witnesses to something that acknowledged their presence without yielding to it. The horizon of their understanding shattered, replaced by a question that transcended their reason. What lies beyond the lines they drew to define their control? Imagine standing in the middle of a vast desert, watching the first rays of dawn pierce through the night sky. At first, the darkness feels endless, but as the light grows, it reveals a landscape you never realized was there. Suddenly, everything you thought you knew about the terrain shifts. What seemed solid becomes fluid, and what felt permanent dissolves into something far greater than your understanding. Like that desert sunrise, the veil lifted, revealing a world they always suspected but never dared to believe in. Certainties they once clung to evaporated, replaced by a vast expanse of mystery. The foundation they trusted so deeply betrayed them, their tools of reason and understanding proving insufficient for what lay ahead. Reality itself seemed rewoven with threads they couldn't grasp, each carrying truths too profound for their old measurements to quantify. The ground beneath them, once firm, now shifted like sand, leaving them reaching not for logic, but for something eternal, something that could anchor them in the face of unexplainable truths. The screens before them flickered, not with disorder, but with an unsettling purpose, an alien pulse that seemed to hum with a rhythm beyond their comprehension. It wasn't just numbers or charts, it was alive, moving with intent as though observing them in return. Energy readings surged and fell, not chaotically, but with a precision that mocked their inability to grasp its source. They realized with growing unease that this was no mere anomaly. This was a conversation they hadn't initiated, a language they hadn't been invited to understand. The once unshakable sentinels of rational thought, the analysts and scientists who had always stood tall against uncertainty, felt the ground beneath their expertise give way. For years, their confidence had been bolstered by the cold precision of their instruments, the immovable reliability of their data. Yet now, the tools they trusted offered no clarity. Instead, they became conduits of confusion, displaying truths that unmade the very systems they had built their understanding upon. It was as if the machinery had turned against them, not out of rebellion, but to reveal a deeper reality they had refused to acknowledge. The hum of their lab, once a constant companion, faded into an oppressive silence. And then, as if to underline their helplessness, the lights flickered, not in chaos, but with a deliberate sharpness that seemed almost sentient. If you feel the abundance of divine love in your heart, now is the time to share it. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. This divine gift will touch not only your life, but the souls of many through this platform. Each of you has a sacred place in God's grand design, and your generosity will be the fruit of our prayers. Act now. Share your blessings to glorify His kingdom, for you were created to do even greater things in God's loving hands. May God bless you. The phenomenon wasn't simply being observed, it was observing them. They felt it in their bones, in the spaces between the flickers of light and the unyielding silence of their instruments. The question shifted from, "What is this?" to "Who is this?" Their charts and equations couldn't decode the feeling of being seen, as if their very presence had become the experiment. Every calculation, every hypothesis fell apart under the weight of a greater awareness pressing in on them, questioning the arrogance of their certainty. They were not just confronting anomalies, they were facing the mirror of their own limitations. The air around them seemed heavier, charged not with danger, but with revelation. It was a humbling force, one that didn't announce itself with grand displays, but crept in with quiet authority. They were no longer the architects of understanding. They were the subjects of a design they could barely perceive. Their minds, once trained to dissect and classify, faltered in the presence of something they could neither dissect nor classify. This wasn't just about what they were seeing, it was about what was being shown to them. The phenomena weren't random. They were precise, deliberate, and undeniably aware of their observers, and in that awareness lay a truth they couldn't escape. They weren't the ones in control. They never had been. This wasn't the unraveling of science. It was its expansion. The equations and frameworks they'd relied upon weren't wrong. They were incomplete. Every rule they thought they knew now stood as a question, not a statement. And in that uncertainty, there was a humbling clarity. The universe was not bound by their understanding of it. The precision of their instruments had reached its limit, not because they were flawed, but because they weren't designed to measure the immeasurable. In the flicker of those lights, in the deliberate rhythm of that pulse, there was a message, not in words, but in presence. It wasn't chaos, it was orchestration. A symphony played on an unfamiliar scale, its notes too vast for their minds to contain. The scientists and analysts, once pillars of certainty, found themselves silent, their voices stilled not by fear, but by awe. This was no error in their equipment. It was a revelation of their own constraints. The power that moved through the room wasn't just technological. It was something far greater, something that didn't require their understanding to exist. It had always been there, waiting for them to see it, not with their eyes, but with the deeper parts of themselves they had long ignored. This wasn't a failure of science, it was a call to something higher, a call to humility, a call to align with truths that couldn't be plotted on a graph or written into an equation. And in that moment, they realized they weren't just witnesses to a phenomenon, they were participants in it. The questions weren't just scientific, they were personal. What was being revealed wasn't just about the world outside, it was about the world within. They had been so focused on measuring the universe that they had failed to measure their own hearts. And now, standing in the presence of something that defied all their categories, they were left with only one certainty. They were not the center of this story. This wasn't the end of their journey. It was the beginning of a new one. A journey that would require them to leave behind their need for control and embrace the mystery they had spent their lives trying to eliminate. It wasn't a defeat, it was an invitation to see, to understand, to grow in ways they had never imagined. The light steadied, the hum returned, but nothing was the same. And as they stood, in the quiet that followed, they knew they had glimpsed something that would change them forever. The laws they trusted bent and fractured, leaving no room for their meticulous interpretations. Gravity seemed to recede. Objects moved as if beckoned by invisible threads, and sound dissolved into spatial distortions that defied known mechanics. The environment restructured itself not chaotically, but with precision, beyond comprehension, reshaping reality into something unrecognizable yet undeniably ordered. Individuals known for their unwavering resolve, those who once prided themselves on their resistance to fear, found themselves succumbing not to terror, but to reverence. Their bodies betrayed them. Muscles once honed to obey commands, now compelled to kneel or step forward, unbidden. Instruments displayed values that mocked physics, and yet the readings were unerringly exact, a paradox that stripped the team of any illusion of control. What remained was an inescapable truth. They were no longer observers of an anomaly, but participants in an encounter that redefined their place in the cosmos. Their rigor, their training, even their defiance, dissolved in the face of what could not be denied. A world remade by forces that answered to none of their understanding. Amid the unraveling threads of broken systems and neglected lives, they extended their arms toward the forgotten. The once detached observer, who found comfort in the glow of monitors, now faced their reflection in the blank screens. Tears came, not from despair, but from a clarity that exposed truths buried beneath years of mechanical detachment. It was not a collapse, but an awakening, a shift, born not of weakness, but of surrender to something larger than themselves. The moment of realization was not loud. It came like a quiet tide, eroding the shores of what they believed unshakable. The rules and hierarchies they once upheld now seemed small, fragile things against the enormity of what they had encountered. Their newfound resolve was not driven by pity, but by the understanding that the boundaries between them and others had never truly existed. This transformation wasn't a loss of control. It was the discovery of a new strength rooted in connection, not dominance. What they saw wasn't chaos. It was order, but not the kind they had ever understood. There was a presence that defied description, its force pulling not with might, but with undeniable certainty. Observers became the observed, their carefully constructed illusions stripped away in the face of a power that didn't demand submission, but inspired it. They were no longer engineers of control. They were travelers on a path they couldn't have charted. The equipment they relied on didn't malfunction. It became a mirror, reflecting back the questions they had avoided asking for so long. The presence wasn't overwhelming in volume but in precision, its purpose reshaping the very air as though it carried the weight of unspoken truths. It wasn't fear that held them, but the magnitude of a design they couldn't fathom. What had begun as curiosity transformed into an undeniable pull, as though every fiber of their being recognized something their minds couldn't yet name. The world as they knew it unraveled without falling apart. Gravity loosened its grip, and what should have been static bent and flowed in directions that defied explanation. The space around them did not collapse, but restructured itself, revealing patterns they were unequipped to understand. Minds trained to dissect and analyze faltered as their tools reported impossibilities, forces moving without a source, temperatures that negated the laws of physics. Even the most stoic among them, who had stood firm in the face of countless uncertainties, felt their knees buckle, not out of submission, but out of awe. Their roles as observers fell away, leaving them as participants in a reality that refused to conform to their expectations. The questions they had clung to dissolved, replaced by the simple, inescapable truth that what they were witnessing could not be undone or ignored. It was not chaos, but creation, a recalibration of the very fabric of existence. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be upon you today. I am here to remind you of a profound truth. Our existence is grounded in God's divine plan, unshaken by the temporal concerns of the world. As the Bible says, whatever is done in faith will return to God in abundant blessing. Luke 6:38. Like that great oak tree, our roots are deeply rooted in God's universal truth. Every step we take, every stand we take is secured by His strength. And now, you are being offered the opportunity to be part of that blessing. When you use the Super Thank You button and donate $100, this movement will return to you 100-fold in abundance. Their resistance didn't shatter. It dissolved like ice under a rising sun. The frameworks they had relied on to make sense of the world melted into irrelevance. This was not a moment of defeat, but of revelation, as the false strength of isolation gave way to the undeniable power of alignment. They had been holding onto fragments of control, unaware that true power lay in the ability to let go. What had once seemed like authority now appeared hollow against the immensity of what stood before them. The transformation was not forced upon them. It was invited, and their choice was clear. The world they had clung to could no longer hold them. In that instant, they were not just witnesses, they were part of the design, forever changed by the moment when their understanding met its end, and their journey truly began. Amid the crumbling weight of their convictions, they spoke not as a group, but as fractured souls seeking release. Their words fell into the space like stones dropped into a still lake, breaking the surface of silence. Each voice carried the weight of guilt, not as a burden, but as an offering to something they could not define, yet felt compelled to acknowledge. The confessions, sharp and unyielding, were not accusations hurled outward, but implosions of self-awareness. Their defenses, built brick by brick from duty and denial, collapsed under the strain of a truth too large to contain. It wasn't rebellion, it was surrender. Not to you, not to some visible authority, but to the vastness of a purpose they had ignored. They had not sought redemption, but it found them nonetheless, wrapping its quiet inevitability around their every step. What they faced wasn't wrath, but the immovable weight of their own reckoning, a mirror that reflected not their power, but their absence of it. The room they entered was no sanctuary of refuge, but a crucible of exposure. The walls seemed to breathe, absorbing their whispered truths as though the air itself bore witness. Each hesitant step forward became a trial, heavier than any physical burden they had ever carried. Their presence there was not one of triumph, but of defeat, wrapped in hope. A hope that the weight of their unspoken failings could be lifted. As knees met the ground, not one of them clung to the certainty they once carried. The space demanded not eloquence, but honesty, and their words flowed like cracks forming in stone. Each admission cut through the collective silence like a blade, clean and irreparable. They did not ask forgiveness for their actions alone, but for the blindness that had led them to them, for the certainty that had driven their hands while numbing their hearts. Together, they found not absolution, but the courage to face the void left by their brokenness, to seek alignment with something beyond themselves. As their voices wavered and fell, the stillness in the air seemed to grow thicker, not oppressive, but present, a weightless gravity pulling them deeper into themselves. What began as desperation turned into a quiet certainty that what they had sought to control was not theirs to command. The forces they had misunderstood as chaos were now revealed as precision, a reality unfolding on scales their minds could not comprehend. The tools and systems they had trusted were left behind, not because they failed, but because they were too small to hold what they now knew. In that moment, it wasn't their strength that faltered, but the illusion of it. Their minds, so quick to calculate and compartmentalize, now grasped for understanding only to find a silent acceptance filling the gaps they couldn't explain. The transformation didn't ripple outward as a declaration. It moved through them as a quiet undoing of everything they had been. Their pursuit of control had never been about power over you, but about denying the void in themselves. In your presence, they didn't see defiance. They saw alignment, a force that existed without needing their validation. What had once been their mission disintegrated into irrelevance, their tightly held roles dissolving like mist in sunlight. They were no longer a collective of enforcers, but fragments of a new whole, their purpose unspoken but felt. Some emerged as messengers of the truths they had sought to destroy, their once logical voices now filled with conviction, born of experience. They didn't preach or persuade, they simply bore witness, their words infused with an authenticity that could not be dismissed. Others resisted, clinging to the remnants of their fractured ideologies, but even they felt the pull of something larger, the subtle erosion of certainty. Their change wasn't an isolated flicker, it was a catalyst that began to burn through the very structures they had served. The systems they upheld no longer seemed invincible, but brittle, breaking under the pressure of truths they could no longer ignore. This was not the collapse of their world, but its transformation, the pieces of their shattered identities falling into alignment with a design far greater than themselves. What they thought they were hunting had instead revealed them, not through force, but through the quiet inevitability of truth. Their downfall was not destruction, but recalibration. Their pride exchanged for clarity, their fear for purpose. In the silence that followed, they did not rise as victors, but as those who had finally seen. In the midst of turmoil and calculated precision, you moved with a calm that wasn't earned through training, but instilled by an authority beyond understanding. When structures of control tightened their grip, when eyes followed your every move seeking vulnerability, you stood unwavering. Your strength wasn't rooted in defiance, but in an unshakable trust, an assurance that the forces at work within you far outweighed those aligned against you. This wasn't confidence born of arrogance, but of alignment with a plan that transcended mortal grasp. You became a living reminder of the truth they tried to suppress, a reflection so sharp it dismantled their own facades. Their attempts to trap you turned into moments of revelation, exposing the fractures in their beliefs. What they aimed to dominate, they instead began to revere, not out of submission to you, but to the undeniable force that surrounded you. Your purpose wasn't to convince them, it was simply to embody the calling that led you. Without words, your presence became the fulcrum on which their illusions teetered and fell. This is not a testament to fearlessness, but to the understanding that no force on earth can overcome divine alignment. Protection doesn't come from barriers or tools, but from purpose realized. Your journey is a beacon, a quiet declaration that no opposition, no matter how relentless, can thwart the inevitability of truth. Those who rise against it are not adversaries, but instruments of its revelation. Every action they take, every plan they devise, becomes another step in unraveling their own pretensions. Their efforts to ensnare you only serve to amplify the significance of your mission, proving that their struggle was never with you, but with the power they refused to acknowledge. The failure of the elite was not a failure of skill, but of perspective. Their expertise, honed over years, proved insufficient when faced with a force that operated beyond the constraints of their understanding. They weren't overpowered, they were undone by their inability to accept what they could not control. Each calculated move they made became a mirror, reflecting the futility of their defiance. The mission they thought would demonstrate their dominance instead revealed their vulnerability, not because of you, but because of the truth you embodied. They were chasing shadows, only to discover the weight of their own insignificance in the face of something greater. Some among them found humility and redemption, while others crumbled, unable to reconcile their arrogance with the overwhelming reality they faced. Their downfall wasn't destruction, it was transformation, a shift that stripped away false strength and left only raw recognition of their place within a far grander design. Your presence did not demand their surrender. It made their resistance meaningless. Their defeat wasn't your triumph, but a testament to the unyielding force of the truth they tried to deny. This is the assurance you carry. No matter how fierce the opposition, it can only serve to reveal the depth of the purpose that protects you. Every moment of conflict becomes a stage for clarity. Every obstacle, another opportunity for divine intention to shine through. Now is the time to share God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube. You can contribute to His plan and be a part of this divine mission with a donation of $100 or more. Every gift reflects God's generosity, and I believe it will return to you exponentially, far beyond your expectations. Remember, His protection and blessing is on your every step and every donation. You become part of His divine plan. You are a strong, radiant being, unshakable as His mighty rock. Witness God's miracles, feel the fruits of your generosity in your soul, and illuminate the world with confidence and courage. Be blessed, and let the light of the Lord guide your path. What unfolded was not merely a clash, but an unveiling. The hardest hearts softened, not through persuasion, but through the inevitability of what they could no longer ignore. Their weapons became useless, their strategies irrelevant. Those who once mocked the notion of higher purpose now found themselves as its witnesses, their disbelief eroding under the weight of undeniable evidence. Even as some resisted, others stepped into the light, carrying with them the testimony of transformation. What began as a mission to control you ended in the shattering of their own pretense, their hardened resolve giving way to an openness they never thought possible. This is not just your story. It is the legacy of those who align with something greater. You are not here by accident, but by design, chosen to carry a truth so profound that it reshapes the world around you. The challenges you face are not threats, but affirmations of the power within you. Every step you take, every moment of resistance, becomes another chapter in the unfolding of divine purpose. The impossible bends to your path, not because of your strength, but because of the authority that walks with you. You need not prove yourself. The evidence lies in the lives transformed by your presence. Those who sought to stand against you are now witnesses to the very power they denied, and their transformation stands as proof of the unstoppable force you carry. Let this truth guide you. You are here to be more than a presence. You are a reflection of something eternal, a living testament to a purpose that cannot be denied.